Today on the show, we're really excited to welcome back Mary Jo Ehrman. Mary Jo is the author of Farming Without the Bank and Wealth Without the Bank and Wall Street. She was guest on episode number 1 of the Working Cows podcast, and we're happy to have her back. So Mary Jo Ehrman, welcome back to the Working Cows podcast.
Thank you for having me back.
So as I was driving around today on my way to the office, I heard a report that we are looking at a record soybean harvest in the United States, but also looking at the lowest prices in a decade. And so I know a lot of people who've got these soybeans coming out their ears would love to be able to just put them in a bin for a while and wait for the prices to normalize and wait for this trade war with China to go. And it's no fault of their own, but they are facing lower prices with a record harvest, which isn't always a good combination because higher supply is going to drive down that price. So what is the situation that you are seeing people in as far as their ability to wait and their ability to hold on to those beans when the prices are depressed?
You know, it's the same situation kind of that you heard on the radio. They can't, it depends who they are, excuse me, and where they're at financially. They might not be able to hold that grain because the bank's going to come a knocking and say, I need that. And what tends to happen is the bank, it's all based on emotion, right? And typically when we're selling commodities, that's based on emotion anyway. And so if we can take the emotion out of it from the banker's side and from the farmer's side and say, hey, Mr. Banker, if you can carry me another 2 or 3 months, I can make more on those beans. But the bank freaks out, and the banks are in trouble right now. And so, because we're seeing interest rates go up, land prices, everything's going to start coming down. And so they want that stuff paid off because they need collateral. They don't want just a bunch of assets sitting out there. Banks want cash flow. And so the banks come knocking and say, hey, you need to sell those beans. Even though it's at a low price right now, we don't care if you take a loss, but we can't take the loss. And so that's where a lot of that liquidity and control that I talk about comes into play, because if we had the liquidity and the control, could we hang on to those beans? And now we would be driving prices, supply versus demand, versus a driven market, a false driven market by the bankers or even by the government, right?
So I'm going to assume that people who are joining us here, workingcows.net/56 is going to be the show notes page. There will be a link to Mary Jo's previous episode, which was number 1. Workingcows.net/1 was her first episode, also my first episode. And So she joined me for the very first episode of the Working Cows podcast just about a year ago now, as we just did our anniversary episode. So you can go there and check out kind of the idea that she's presenting as Farming Without the Bank, the infinite banking concept, and some of those things for a little bit more of a background on those issues. But let's just give a brief overview of what it is you are presenting as a way to resume or wrestle that control back from the banks on your farming operation.
So in the Farming Without the Bank book, really it's just a synopsis of how to get back liquidity control of your money and put that money somewhere where you've got some guarantees and it grows while you use it. And in order to do that, we just use correctly structured dividend paying whole life insurance as the tool to the concept that you mentioned, the infinite banking concept. The life insurance policy is the tool that says, hey, this concept and thought process of liquidity and control, we need something to help with both of those. And that's where the life insurance comes in. But at the end of the day, liquidity and control. And even if you don't use the life insurance policy, if you borrowed money from your savings account or you're operating your entire operation on cash, you're able to sit on those beans and you don't have to pay the bank back. So you have leverage, unlike the guy that's borrowing from the bank.